All right, diving in again with another deep dive. And today we're going deep on something pretty basic, right? I mean, we're talking about love, but specifically, we're going to be looking at how a particular Christian community puts love into action. And I got to say, it gets kind of messy.
Yeah, it does.
We've got some excerpts from 3 sermons here, and they use this really fascinating comparison, church camp versus young life camp, to sort of drive their point home. I don't know, have you ever been to either of those?
I have, yeah. To both,
Oh,
actually.
okay, cool. Well, you probably pick up on the vibe then, right?
Yeah, they're definitely different.
Different, exactly. So the sermons kind of pull out this like key difference in how the leaders, the adults interact with the kids in these camps. Like with Young Life, the leaders they're right there in it with the kids, right? Like playing these crazy messy games, getting all dirty, fully engaged.
Yeah, they're not just like standing on the sidelines supervising, they're actually participating, getting your hands dirty.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. And, the sermons point out that at some church camps, it's not quite the same story. Like, the leaders are there, yeah, but they're keeping a bit of a distance, staying clean, maybe a little more, I don't know, detached.
It makes you think.
For sure.
What does that say about how we approach loving people in general? Like, are we willing to get in there and get a little messy, or do we prefer to kind of stay back and keep things neat and tidy?
Right. It's so easy to love from a distance. We all know that. But these sermons are like really challenging us to think about what it means to like really embody love, to get involved in all the messiness of life right alongside other people, not just, talk about it from a safe distance.
And that's where this whole concept of incarnational ministry comes in.
Okay, so just for those who might not be familiar with the theological lingo, break that down for us a little.
Well, it's this idea of following the example of Jesus.
Right.
He left heaven, which is, perfection, and he came down to earth. He became human. He experienced the messiness of our world firsthand. He got right into it.
Okay, so instead of just talking about love, we should like actually be living it out
Yeah.
in tangible, practical ways.
Exactly. It's not about avoiding the hard stuff or staying in our comfort zones. It's about showing up, even when it's uncomfortable, being present in the lives of other people. Think of it this way. You wouldn't expect someone to really understand your family just by, like, attending one holiday dinner, right?
Right.
Real relationships take time, shared experiences, and yeah, sometimes that means getting into some messes together.
That's a good analogy. So are they saying that this messy love thing should like extend beyond youth groups and into how we actually function within the church itself?
They are, and that's actually where we're going to head next in this deep dive.
Okay, so we've talked about this whole messy love thing and how it plays out, in youth groups and stuff. But what about within the church itself? Like how do we actually practice that kind of deep, involved love with our fellow church members? How does that actually work?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. One of the sermons brings up this, I don't know if you'd call it a fun fact, but it's definitely a fact. Only 17% of Christians in the U.S. actually attend church twice a month or more.
Whoa. Really? That's way lower than I would have thought. I would guess it was more than that.
Yeah, most people are surprised by that statistic.
It kind of makes you wonder then about how deep those connections, actually are within our churches, right? Like if people are only showing up every once in a while.
Yeah, and that's where they introduce this idea of a reset encounter.
Reset encounter. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So it's like, because it's so normal, right? For people to miss a Sunday here or there, like we just kind of reset our expectations. You see someone at church, you just assume everything's fine. And you probably won't even notice if they're absent for like weeks.
Oh yeah, I totally get that. It's like going to the gym, irregularly. Like you
Yeah.
recognize people, but you don't really know their routine. Someone could be struggling or maybe they haven't been there in forever, but you'd have no idea because you just assume they're off doing their own thing.
Exactly. And the sermons are suggesting that this kind of, irregular attendance can actually make it harder to truly love each other. Well, like we might miss those moments when someone's really struggling and needs support because we just haven't even noticed they're gone.
Yeah, you're just not paying that close of attention.
Right.
So are they saying that our current model of church, like with its focus on, just those weekly gatherings, that it might not actually be enough to like grow that truly deep, messy love that we've been talking about? I mean, that's a pretty bold statement.
It is. It is. And they back it up by pointing to the early church. Like, back then, daily interaction was totally normal. They were meeting in homes, they were sharing meals, they were supporting each other, like, through everyday life. It was just this much more intertwined kind of love, almost familial, you know?
Like a real family.
Yeah.
It makes sense, though, right? Like, if you're only seeing someone for an hour or two on a Sunday, it's hard to really know them, let alone love them the way Jesus calls us to.
Yeah.
It'd be like expecting to have this deep, intimate relationship with a friend you only see like once a month for coffee. It's not going to happen.
Exactly. And while we can't, perfectly replicate the early church model, these sermons they're challenging us to think about ways we can create more opportunities for that kind of, messy, authentic interaction in our churches today. Like, how can we make it more like a family?
Okay, so more than just like Sunday service, what would that actually look like? Any practical ideas?
Well, they don't really give a specific answer, but they definitely encourage us to think creatively. Maybe it's, smaller group gatherings during the week. Maybe it's intentionally reaching out to people who are struggling. Maybe it's just simply prioritizing, one-on-one time with other people in your church. The point is, it's about moving beyond those surface level interactions and actually creating space for a deeper connection and support, like really being there for each other.
It's making me think about my own experiences in different kinds of communities. Like my closest friends, we are constantly in each other's lives, celebrating the highs, helping each other through the lows. And yeah, sometimes it gets messy, but that's kind of what makes it real.
Exactly. And the sermons are suggesting that, maybe we need to bring a little more of that real life into our churches, not just, showing up with our Sunday best and kind of keeping things surface level, but really opening ourselves up to that messiness of authentic community, actually being a family.
This is making me rethink how I approach church altogether. I mean, I love that idea of fostering a deeper sense of family, of really belonging. But I wonder, like, is daily interaction even realistic? I mean, everyone's so busy these days, right?
That's a really good point. It's definitely a challenge, but maybe it's more about being intentional than it is about, frequency. Like, can we carve out pockets of time and space for that deeper connection, even if it's not like every single day?
Good point. It's about quality time, not just quantity. But what about loving those outside the church walls? Those who aren't part of our church family. How does this messy love thing apply to like how we interact with our neighbors, especially those who might be different from us?
Oh, that's a great question. And that actually leads us perfectly into the next part of our deep dive. Because you know what? These sermons, they don't just focus on love within the church. They also challenge us to think about how we love those outside our, our familiar circles, those who are different, those who are strangers to us.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about messy love, within youth groups and within the church itself. But what about taking that love outside our comfort zones, like really out there?
Yeah.
Into our neighborhoods, our communities? That's got to be where it gets really tough, right?
It is, definitely. It's one thing to love the people who are like us, who share our values and beliefs and all that. But loving those who are different, who might even disagree with us on some pretty fundamental things, that's where the rubber really meets the road. And that's where the sermons bring in this idea of xenophilia.
Xenophilia. Okay, now there's a word you don't hear every day. You're going to have to break that one down for me.
Sure. So xenophilia is basically the love of strangers, the opposite of xenophobia, which is the fear of strangers. And these sermons are making the case that as Christians, we're actually called to embrace xenophilia, to love not just other Christians, but to extend that love outwards to everyone, including those who are totally different from us.
I mean, yeah, that makes sense. Especially when you think about Jesus' command to love our neighbors as ourselves. But how do we actually do that in a world that feels more and more divided every day?
Right. It's a struggle, and these sermons don't shy away from that. They even use this example, and I think a lot of people can relate to this. Living in a town that's really politically diverse and feeling tempted to just move, to go somewhere where everyone thinks like you.
Oh, yeah. I get that. Especially these days. Like with social media, everyone's in your face with their opinions all the time. And it just feels like those divides are getting wider and wider.
It does. And the sermons aren't saying, those feelings are wrong. But they are pushing back on this idea that separating ourselves from people who are different is the answer. We're called to love our neighbors, right? Not just the ones who are easy to love. And they point to this really powerful story from the Gospels, the one where Jesus sends his disciples to live in Samaritan homes.
Wait. Samaritans? I thought they were like enemies of the Jews back then.
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of a radical example of loving your neighbor?
Totally. And I think that's the point. Like, Jesus isn't calling us to this comfortable surface level love, right? He's calling us to a love that, like, crosses all those boundaries, that
Wow.
challenges our assumptions and pushes us outside our comfort zones. He's asking us to be willing to enter into the homes and lives of people who might be completely different from us, to be the guests, the ones being welcomed.
Yeah, wow. I mean, it makes you think, instead of always trying to, bring Jesus to our neighbors, maybe we should be looking for how he's already at work in their lives,
Yeah.
even if they can't see it yet.
Yes, exactly. And that brings us back to this idea of Jesus in every neighborhood, which actually has a kind of double meaning, you know?
Okay, I'm listening.
So on one hand, it means that, like, we as Christians should be living out our faith everywhere, in every corner of our community, being active and engaged and showing love and compassion to everyone we meet.
And on the other hand, it means recognizing that Jesus is already present in every single person. No matter what they believe or where they come from, our job isn't to, like, fix them or convert them, but to just, see that image of God in them and love them as they are.
It's a tough concept, but it's also really beautiful when you think about it. It's about approaching everyone we meet with a sense of wonder and expectation. Like, we might just encounter Jesus in the most unexpected places.
I love that. So bringing it back to this idea of messy love, are they saying that loving strangers will inevitably be messy? Like, we're going to mess up, get things wrong, have those tough conversations that we'd rather avoid.
You know, I think they would say that's all part of it. Real love isn't always pretty or easy. It requires vulnerability, humility, a willingness to actually listen to people and learn from those who are different. And yeah, we're probably going to have to confront some of our own, biases and assumptions along the way. It's going to be challenging.
But maybe that's where the real growth happens. Like when we step outside of what's comfortable and embrace that messiness of just connecting with other human beings.
Absolutely. It's in the mess that we find the most amazing truths and the most unexpected blessings. And it's in the mess that we experience that crazy transformative power of love.
Wow, this has been a deep dive in every sense of the word.
Mm.
As I think about all three of these aspects of love within the church toward those who are different from us and recognizing Jesus in everyone, I'm seeing a pattern here. It's about moving beyond that surface level, transactional kind of love
Yeah.
and really embracing a deeper, more intentional way of being in relationship. It's about being present, engaged, and yeah, like we said, willing to get our hands dirty.
Yes. It's about recognizing that love is an action. It's a choice we make every single day, not just a feeling. It's about showing up, even when it's hard, and being willing to, share the joys and the sorrows of life with each other, to really walk alongside one another.
So I guess the question for all of us listening is, where do we find ourselves on that spectrum of messy love? Are we on the field, right there in the thick of it? Or are we watching from the bleachers? And are we, if we're really honest, are we truly living out this Jesus in every neighborhood kind of love in our own lives?
Those are great questions to consider. And you know what? There's not always a clear answer. Maybe it's a journey, a process of constantly stepping outside our comfort zones and seeking that deeper connection with God and with everyone around us.
It's definitely giving me a lot to think about. And I hope it's done the same for everyone listening. Because this world, man, this world needs more of that messy love. The kind that isn't afraid to roll up its sleeves and dive into the thick of things. The kind that sees potential and beauty even in the most unexpected places.
Well said. And remember, even the smallest act of love, like, it can have a huge impact. It can start a ripple effect. And together, we can create a more compassionate world, a more just world for everyone. So let's go out there, and let's be those agents of messy love. Let's embrace the mess and see where it leads us.